I have a couple of issues with this resolution about sharing board pay. These boards have been paying members of their board for decades. I think that there was a mayor from Charleston, for example, that it was brought up in a public meeting that he got $50 a month from Heber Power back in 1970. And this isn't anything new that the boards have paid the officials that have served on those boards. I personally feel that if somebody serves on a board, they deserve to get paid on that board if that's what that particular entity wants to do. I have never been a proponent of splitting it 5 ways equally for a couple of reasons. Number one, the city council members that serve on those boards deserve to be paid the same as the other board members. I know the current board members from the city council that are serving on Heber Light and Power have probably made maybe 30 cents an hour for all the time they put in since the first of the year. They get 40% of what they're supposed to get, and I get 40% of their money, which is kind of crazy. I mean, it's like communism. You just split it up evenly, whether you serve on that board or not, you get compensated for it. So I'm not in favor of splitting up the board pay equally amongst the council. If the board, Heber Light and Power or the sewer board wants to pay their board members, I think they ought to pay their board members. If these current board members that serve on city council people, if they don't like the pay, they don't want the pay, try to get the Heber Light and Power board to change their bylaws and not pay any of the people that are on the board. But one of the big problems we've had with Heber Light and Power and all of the issues that boiled up at the end of 2011 was just totally complicated because a portion of that pay that was supposed to go to the board members went to the other city council members that weren't even serving on the board. And then there was issues with paying it back and paying back something that you got for not doing anything. And it created even a more complicated issue than it should have been. So as far as I'm concerned, this resolution, I don't like splitting up the pay anyway. And as far as the technicality goes, I don't want to dismiss what Councilman Rowland said, when he said, well, I want to abide by all of the resolutions and the ordinances that Heber City has. And the one that he's broken is he refuses to receive board pay. So
no, I don't refuse it. I have the right, as stated in the resolution, to disperse that out of my law.
I said this was a technicality.
Each of you have your own sole discretion.
Remember, he's not an attorney, so.
Well, I understand. Very kind, I understand. But that's my view on it. I just assume the resolution say we drop splitting board pay altogether.
And when it comes down to it, this is my, and I do agree with Jeff to a certain degree. Where I draw the line is, I do believe everyone should be compensated for their time. I don't disagree with that. But that compensation should be coming from the prevailing authority that requires me to be there in the first place, not the board. If I'm required to be at a board, that's because I'm there as an elected official. And as such, I should be compensated through the city, not through that board. Because heaven knows there are dozens of boards which don't compensate, some of which spend a lot of time with. I'm not compensated for that. So to say and justify that one board can compensate and another can't, we're misplacing where that compensation is coming from, the priority wage. I agree that we should be compensated for our time. It just shouldn't be coming from the boards.
But you would say then, just want to...
If I'm going to a board, I report and I spend 2 hours on that board, I get paid an hourly rate for spending 2 hours on that board.
Right, and then you're saying, the fact that I am a Heber City elected official, be it a mayor or a council member, and I'm on that board, regardless of what the board decides to do, I have a higher duty to my... I have a first duty to my elected official as a Heber City citizenry giving me that. And so if I get compensation for there, then what? Then if the board says, we value Councilman Franco, Mayor McDonald for what he does as the chairman, and Councilman Potter. We're not beholden to that first duty of, we want to compensate them for what they do. We appreciate what they do. So you receive that money. I guess the real question is, then what? And distinguishing, being a chairman is different than being a council member, right? Or a board member. What is your feeling on, those three receive that money, then what happens? The resolution where it said, it all goes into a fund.
That's absolutely correct. And that's how because we don't have the policy in place that compensates us for our time, and because it's just rampant for abuse in these, because there are very strict laws that regulate how elected officials are compensated. Extremely strict. And I think it goes without saying why. Because if there's anything that's going to manipulate or cause an elected official to change their behavior or action, it's largely going to be monetarily based. And so I believe that's why there are extremely strict regulations overseeing how we're compensated. Now, if I'm an elected official and I'm being put into a position where I'm required to be there, and I'm being compensated for that position outside of those protected laws, in my mind, this is my interpretation, I feel I'm abusing the very laws that are in place to protect me.
And I think I would say, if you receive that, let's say that hypothetically that is how the majority of the people would, whoever the powers that be would say. If the mayor then receives additional compensation and says, you know what, I'm going to take that risk upon myself, that's on him. He receives that compensation, that's one way to look at it, and say, he receives that, and he sits in a glass house, and we understand what the council wants to do, but it's a board money that goes to the mayor, and if the mayor keeps it, then people can raise questions about that.
And historically, it hasn't been a glass house.
Right.
That's exactly where the abuse is coming from.
And that's where I thought your resolution with regard to transparency had some teeth.
Yes.
Where you can say, regardless of what the board does, once that money is received, we want a conduit. We want, as Heber City, to be a conduit. If the board stonewalls us and says we're not going to show what the amounts are, but I don't know that the board did that. I think the board actually... Right.
But there's no obligation for any board to show compensation.
Okay, so that was my point. That was my point. Then what your resolution would say is, we want Heber City to be a conduit because our elected official is there. And if he receives it and the board says no, then we're not going to worry about it, we don't want to fight that battle. But because the money goes to this official, part of our group or family, we want to be a conduit to show that we disclose what that money is. And I don't think the mayor has a problem with that. We want to be a conduit to the public to show what the compensation is. Charleston chooses not to do it, big deal. Midway, we're not them. Wasatch County doesn't get paid. But Heber City, anybody that sits on there that's Heber City, we are a conduit, we have a resolution, we're saying we want that disclosed. That's what your resolution is really saying.
That is part of the resolution, that is correct.
But we've been on for over 30 minutes. This is why I want to put this little word meeting onto it. There's still some legal issues on this that need to be clarified and understood.
I still have not heard anything that warrants legal issues.
I do. So just because of some situations, right, what you think sounds great, and other members, there's still some issues we all think separate on this. Get some other legal advice and put this on the word meeting and bring it back and put it to the council again. There's too bit of obscurity, what's this and that. Your opinion is what you feel like. I feel that's great. Others feel different. And the legal advice is telling us one way, so I think this needs to back to the work meeting like I suggested and talk about it another day.
I'd like to suggest that I'm kind of in Jeff's camp. I didn't like to change it, but this way in the first place. Whoever on the board could get paid, and they get paid. And I'd like to suggest also we keep the mayor's the same because he has a lot more meetings he has to go to, and extra meetings.
And the compensation should be reflected from his base salary, not through.
Just a second. And Heber Light and Power is an interlocal entity. The city should be paying him for that. Okay? The company pays that, board of directors. And the company, and it's a separate thing. Heber City does not run that company.
No one's suggesting that we are.
He said that.
No one's saying that we are.
I don't understand where you're coming from, Harry.
No, I'm saying,
You guys have a bit of trouble with transparency. I don't think any of us do. We don't have a bit of trouble with transparency. I'm getting sick of hearing that word because we have it. Excuse me. Just when we start, I know you like that word more than any of the rest of us. I don't feel like we have a problem with transparency in this city council. And I think the mayor deserves what he gets paid right now. I think the mayor's salary, and that should be above that.
no one's questioning what the mayor should or shouldn't be paid when it comes to his salary. And I do agree with you. If it's decided that he is spending an inordinate amount of time in his obligations as the mayor, then that reflection should come through his base salary, not through back channels such as boards and other entities which are paying privately and without any oversight or control because he is the mayor.
Now listen.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Now let me
No.
finish. Okay? It's a whole different board over there. Doesn't come through his salary. I'm talking about keeping his salary the same and keep his board paid the same. Separate from ours because he has a whole different set of responsibilities and obligations. He spends a lot more time than the rest of us do.
There is no transparency.
Then his base salary should be increased if that's the case. If he is obligated to serve the bylaws dictate that he needs to serve as chairman of the Heber Light Power, as the mayor, and if he's not being compensated enough because of that obligation, then the compensation should come from the city, not from the board. Because if the board changes their pay and does away with it, then you've just negated your very argument. Because he's now no longer compensated that amount. That we answer to the city. They are the prevailing entity which dictates and what we are bound to. If we're spending time at meetings, at boards, because we're obligated to be there, our compensation should come from the city.
It's the chicken and egg argument all over again. His first responsibility is to the city. That's the only reason that he is there as chairman or whatever board position, as the city.
His responsibility to Heber Light and Power is Heber Light and Power ratepayers first.
The first primary responsibility is
It's not
mayor.
as an elected official.
Is mayor because he would not be there if it wasn't for him being elected as mayor.
And then board members would be on the board unless we get appointed by the mayor.
That's exactly
That's
right.
very true.
But there's no transparency about who the board pays through Heber Power because we
You
don't
can,
understand.
once you go back and write this thing, put transparency into it, but this thing's not even close to being to resolve it.
It is a good start. It is a very good
Just
start,
run back
and it's
through the
going
board
to,
meeting, you can rewrite that thing, I'd add you don't show up either, you don't get paid, that's what they do, but.
I'm happy to.
I don't know,
Right now.
I haven't heard anything yet that has been suggested for this to change, other than removing items which some members are uncomfortable with. So this can go back to work meeting. As it stands right now, I don't see anything to change. I really don't.
Well, there's still.
I think if you were to call for a vote right now, it would pass. And if it would pass, then what's that a reflection of?
Well, there's still some legal advice I want from legals.
Somebody make a motion.
The plenary powers that are given to us through state government, through reserve powers, allow us to add further ethical dimensions to whatever the state code is or whatever previous resolutions we have. There's really not a question here about legal authority. Okay, plenary powers allow us to do that. In fact, if we want to outlaw soda pop, we can. Okay, if we want to make pets have a seatbelt, we can. If we want to pass this resolution, we can.
And I'd like to make a motion that we amend and approve resolution number 2014-11.
I second that, but what is your amendment to it?
You can't make a motion if the chair calls for it.
I don't make offense, as is.
I second the motion.
The chair can call for a motion. This needs to go back, and same as with number 13.
Does the chair require to call for a motion?
Yes, it does. These bylaws say.
Does it?
You should be.
I would, if, I mean, just thinking, I have a review, common sensely, just applying common sense. If, I don't know, the mayor can, if that were technically the rule all the way through, then any motion that the mayor didn't agree with, he would just say, I didn't call for it, and he would stonewall it. So that can't be the rule, but,
Says he can determine if motions are in order.
that's
That
different
means,
than-
that means he's
that-
to read every single motion.
Well,
And
if you read it, if you interpret it that way, that the fact that he gets to determine whether it's in order or not, you can vote on that as a council and agree to disagree. I think that would override it. You have to articulate in the record why. Yes, make it whoever. I mean, it wouldn't be Alan, but whoever is the mayor and he says, hey, I don't think that that motion is in order, they have to articulate with specificity why they don't think that's in order. And then they bear the burden of the reasonableness of that, right? If they can't, somebody and the three of them vote against it, and you can change it.
It says here, shall determine if motions are in order.
Yeah, that's fine, but I'm saying we have to articulate what that means.
Say it's out of order is a different criteria than saying whether you
Right.
can vote on the motion.
Out of order would mean, that is so far out of left field, we haven't even discussed about that. That motion lacks foundation, it's out of order.
Yeah.
That's not from saying, look, if I disagree with something, I'm just gonna say as the mayor that I'm not going to call for a motion. I mean, if that's the way you guys are interpreting it, I would tell you that as a board, or as a council, you gotta get together and change that interpretation of the fund.
I guess it's never been my understanding that the mayor has prevailing authority over whether or not a motion can be called.
No, that's not what I'm
And
saying.
I think that's been generally, again, that's how it's always been understood, that any council member can call for a properly agenda item, can call for a motion on that item.
Yeah, and I think the language is to say, you can't have a rogue council member just call for something and keep calling and calling and calling and filibuster. The mayor there kind of has the common sense and says, hey, that's out of order. That's I think how you interpret that. Or just do what you want to do. I want to stay out of the internal things and just understand, just friendly observation, just the two of you, the group have worked well, we work well together. And
You know, in light of that comment, I will do this. I will rescind that motion, remove it, but that doesn't mean this is going away. Because if this goes back to the work meeting, fine, but I don't see any reason why, as a council member, I have every right and authority to put this back on the regular meeting. And so I will give, in light of what you just said, I think it's more important that we as a group find ways to work harmoniously together because we can accomplish a heck of a lot more than that. So I'm willing to concede, but that does not mean this goes away.
I agree, and I think you have the right to bring it either way. And I don't think the mayor.
And that's why I requested it back to.
But the points from which you're requesting it, I could not disagree with more. The only reason I'm doing this is out of hope to preserve the continuity of this council, not for you, Alan.
And it also puts us off a month because Councilman Bradshaw is going to be out of town next
Exactly.
week, so it bumps us a whole entire month ahead before, which is.
So why, I guess I don't understand why is push all of a sudden, something that's never been discussed.
Because it's time. Because it's
It's your
needed.
time to make.
Because we need to be accountable, we need to show even more good faith in all of our first duties, our first elected
We get all that.
responsibilities.
I get all those little speeches you put out, I get those.
Okay, well, obviously you don't agree to it or have the same commitment to it that I feel within me. And I am very, very weary of having to wait and having to make excuses and having to wonder because the transparency is not there. And I'm also frustrated that I can't fulfill my responsibility, my fiduciary responsibility to my second responsibility on board assignments because of the lack of information. Now, that can all be done away with if we can pass this resolution. This is not to benefit me. I do not want your extra money. Okay? Please, let me say it again. I don't want your extra money. Right? I want transparency. I'm committed to that. I've taught it for decades in the classroom, and I'm not going to give it up right now just because it might be a little inconvenient for someone.